Hi everyone, it is that time. I'm here to film a video about Nicci French. If you're new to my channel, hello. My name is Jen, I'm an author and a book reviewer. If you are not new to this channel, then you know that over the past 2 years, I've become somewhat of a Nicci French stan. Nicci French is a crime thriller writer, and at the point of filming this in September 2021, they have written and published 23 books. I finished reading the most recent one, which is coming out this morning, and I'm going to talk to you about all of their titles. I'm going to tell you which ones I didn't love so much, which ones I absolutely adored, where I would recommend starting with their books, and just discuss why I think I love their writing so much. Some of that is due to time and place, but most of it is obviously due to damn good writing. Nicci French is a husband and wife writing duo, so it's two people writing these books, and I always find that dynamic really interesting, especially as an author myself. I can't imagine writing a book with someone else, especially with Mr. M. Like, I can't imagine working with my partner in that way. I find it so interesting. Obviously, I'm a children's author as well as writing adult books, so I do work with illustrators and we create books together, but we have entirely separate roles, so it's very different. The process of actually writing a book with someone, I think, is just kind of blows my mind a little bit. I love it. So they have also written books separately, which I haven't read. Maybe that is my next point of call. So there are still some books out there, but I've read all of the books that they have written together. I have sat down this morning and ranked them, which I thought would be a hard thing to do, but actually I found it quite easy. So as I said, they write separately too. So separately, they are Nikki Gerard and Sean French. Nikki is a freelance journalist. She founded a women's magazine. She also started a campaign for better access rights for carers of patients with dementia. She's done a lot of work against the closure of libraries recently. Sean is also a freelance journalist and he used to work for the New Statesman. And as I said, separately, they have also written books. I first came across Nicci French 2 years ago. I didn't read loads of crime in my 20s. As a teenager, I devoured so much crime. I think I read every single Agatha Christie book. I read before that all the Point crime books. I feel that was kind of a rite of passage. And then I didn't read much crime at all in my 20s, but a couple of years ago, summer 2019, I got an email from Jess Barrett, who is Nicci French's publicist, and said, "Hey Jen, I know you don't tend to read thrillers that much, but I think you might really like this. Can I send you a copy?" And it was their latest book, which is called The Lying Room. It was their latest book at that point. I was just about to go on book tour to Sweden and Denmark, and I thought, you know what, I would quite like to have a real plot heavy book in my bag. You know, sometimes you just crave a really just big book you can lose yourself in, and it was a big book. It's somewhere in this pile. I'll show you in a bit and we'll talk about it. And I said, yes, please send it to me. So I packed it in my suitcase and I read it all in one go on a train from Uppsala in Sweden to Copenhagen in Denmark. It's about a 5-hour train, I think. And I just loved it. And from book tour, I went straight on holiday. I flew from Copenhagen to Edinburgh. The days of traveling, went to Edinburgh, and I remember standing in Blackwell's in South Clark Street and in the crime thriller section and trying to find something else because I thought I just really want to read more crime. And I bought a crime book and I read it and I just really didn't like it at all. So by that point I was on the Isle of Arran for a week. It sounds like I travel a lot. This was the last time I went anywhere. We were on the Isle of Arran hiking for a week. That was our holiday that year and it was amazing. And I just thought, I just really want to enjoy a crime book. And I reverted back to Nicci French because obviously I had loved The Lying Room, and I downloaded Blue Monday because I was also in the mood for a series, and that's the first of their Frieda Klein series. It's the only series that they've written together. All of the other books are standalones. And when I go hiking, I really enjoy hiking, but I have arthritis, and towards the middle end of the week, if we go hiking, I am in a lot of pain. I'm laughing, it's not funny. A lot of pain, and I get up a few hours earlier than my husband, painkillers, bath to try and warm up my joints, and during that time, throughout the week, I listened to Blue Monday on my own when it was quiet. The sun had just risen. This is what I mean about time and place. I feel like I have quite a strong attachment to the first book because of that. Drinking cups of tea, looking out the window at this red squirrel who we nicknamed Shirley, who lived in the garden of the cottage that we were staying in for our holiday. So it was all very lovely. The book itself, You know, obviously not nice things happen in it because it's a crime thriller, but the atmosphere surrounding, minus the pain, very lovely. And I just fell in love with that book. I then inhaled the next 7 in the series and then went on to read all of the other books that they have ever written. I think it's fair to say I'm a bit of a fan. There are many reasons why I love their books, and I tried to sit down. I was going to make a list, but I want this to be quite a casual video, but I tried to make a list in my head of the things that I particularly love about the work that they do. All of their books have female protagonists, every single one of them, and all of them are everyday people solving crimes. I mean, Frieda, Klein, is a psychotherapist who works with the police, but she is not a police officer, and none of the other books are the police force solving crimes. Obviously, the police are involved, but they are not the main characters, and I just really love people messily trying to solve crimes, getting things wrong, putting themselves in dangerous, awkward, sometimes hilarious situations. As I said, all of the protagonists are women, and they have a lot of agency. The books that I didn't love quite so much tended to be stories about relationships where there wasn't as much crime solving going on, and or it was women who were in more abusive relationships who couldn't do as much because they were trapped in certain situations, and I didn't find that as compelling to read about. But that is a personal preference, and maybe other people would really enjoy reading those, and I'll talk about that more in a minute. What else do I really love about these books? Something I don't like about crime, thriller, horror, as I've spoken about a lot on this channel before, is that often characters with disfigurements and disabilities will be used as the bad guy in the books, and they are committing crimes or hurting people because the world hurt them and they have a vendetta. And none of these books have bad guys with disfigurements or disabilities. In fact, in many of these books, several, there are characters with disfigurements or disabilities, and Nicci French really, I think, is holding a mirror up to the reader saying, are you thinking that these people are the people who've committed the crime? And what prejudices do you have against people with disfigurements and disabilities? It's a very small element to the books, but something that I really appreciated when reading, and I'll speak more about that when we get to individual titles. Another thing they are superb at, maybe the thing that they are best at, is creating a big cast of characters, which means there are always lots of people to suspect. They are really good, especially at dinner parties and interactions. There's a lot of social commentary going on in here as well. House of Correction especially examines the prison system. I appreciated all of those things. All right, they are not perfect books by any means, and as I said, they've been writing for a long time, so some of these books are 20 years old. I was also looking at which ones I preferred, like whether I have preferred their more recent ones or their older ones, and there is a real mix, though their recent ones I have all very much enjoyed. So what I have done, I have put their standalone books into 3 piles. The first pile is a group of books that I didn't really like that much. I'm sorry, Nikki, I'm sorry, Sean, I love you, but out of 23 books, there are going to be some I didn't love as much. And I should say, I've been a completist here. I've read everything that they have written, and I went to the books that I thought I would enjoy the most, going by the blurbs first. So there are a few books I picked up because I wanted to read all of them that maybe I wouldn't have picked up otherwise because the themes didn't scream out to me. So that's the first pile of books, ones I didn't love so much. The middle pile is books that sit happily in the middle. I enjoyed them, but they're not my favorites. And then I have a pile of favorites to talk to you about. Then we'll talk about the Frieda Klein series, because I think that overall is my favorite out of all of the books that they have written. But it's slightly unfair to compare a whole series of 8 books to an individual novel and try and work out which one I prefer, because when writing a series, you have the time and the space to expand on the world and the characters, so you're gonna have a stronger emotional attachment to them than just one individual book. However, I will say that I think plot-wise, there are some of their standalone novels that are better than individual books within the Frieda Klein series. So let's get started. That first pile of books, of the books I didn't enjoy so much, there are 4 books in that pile, and I think that it's telling that 2 of them I don't own anymore. I've passed those on to other people. So let's talk about those first. One of those is Secret Smile, which also has a TV series starring David Tennant, which I haven't watched yet, but would very much like to. This is one of those books where it's someone who's in an emotionally abusive relationship, and I also guessed what was going on. I think we were supposed to guess, so the tension was in us knowing and other characters not knowing, but I just didn't particularly enjoy that as much. And the other book that I no longer have is The Safe House, which I think was one of the first ones that they wrote. And that one I just didn't find particularly believable, and that one frustrated me. So those two I don't have anymore. And the other two, because it's only a pile of 4 of the books that I didn't love so much, are Killing Me Softly, which again is about an abusive relationship. This is about a woman called Alice, yes, who falls head over heels in lust with a man that she sees one day on the street, and she uproots her life and changes it and moves in with him, and obviously doesn't have a very good outcome. Niche recommendation: if you love mountain climbing, then I would recommend this book. I love hiking, not mountain climbing with ropes. Everest, type climbing. If you're into that, there's a lot of stuff about mountain climbing in here, which I think would appeal. So that is a recommendation there. And then the other one in this pile, the final one, is Until It's Over. And the reason that I didn't end up loving this book is because it changes entirely halfway through. The first half I really enjoyed. It's about a woman called Astrid who is a courier. That's another one of the reasons I love their books, actually, that I forgot to say, is that most of them are set in London, which I know is slightly frustrating because lots of things are set in London. But a lot of the characters enjoy walking along Regent's Canal, which I do as well. And most of them are set in North London, which is also where I live. So I think I have an attachment to them for that reason. Anyway, Astrid is a courier in North London. So she's cycling around a lot delivering parcels. And she starts arriving to houses and the people there have died. And the police are very suspicious of her. How are you involved? Because this can't be a coincidence. And Astrid has no idea. The second half of this book is narrated by the killer. And I just didn't enjoy that very much because it went back over the same plot again, just from a different point of view. And I didn't feel like the rewards reaped for me personally as a reader were worth going over everything again. So that was why this one was on that pile. So those are the 4 that I didn't particularly love. And now we're moving on to the books that sit in the middle, ones that I enjoyed, but were not my favorite. So again, these are roughly in order. So the one at the bottom, we're going upwards, is The Other Side of the Door. This is also published as Complicit. The UK title is Complicit. This is the US version. Being a completist, I did buy all the books that they wrote and then realised that I'd bought 2 that were the same with different titles, which was slightly frustrating. This is about a woman called Bonnie, and it opens with her getting rid of a dead body. She's in a friend's flat. Someone that she knows is dead in it. She didn't kill them. She wants to get rid of this body. We don't know why. We don't know who did kill them. She ropes her friend into helping her get rid of this body. It's very farcical because they don't know what they're doing and they make loads of mistakes. That they're not going to get away with it. It's just a bit ridiculous. So I really enjoyed that. I think it was because a lot of this was about a band, and I don't particularly enjoy reading about music. So like with the mountain climbing one, if you enjoy music and perhaps you're in a band yourself, maybe this one would particularly appeal. I still really enjoyed it though. It's just, as I said, not one of my favorites. The next one on this list is Catch Me When I Fall. And something else that I will say that I love about Nicci French in general is the way they handle mental health. On the whole, I think they handle that extremely well, and they're clearly very knowledgeable about those things. As I said, the Frieda Klein books are about someone who is a psychotherapist. In this book, the main character is bipolar, and we go into that in quite a lot of detail. And again, they never have a character who is a murderer who, is bipolar, for instance, which is an annoying trope that you find in crime thrillers. But they do talk about mental health when it comes to the protagonists and the characters who are having, things done to them. So this is about a woman called Holly who is going through manic depressive episodes and therefore is doing things that perhaps definitely put her in vulnerable situations, and therefore she encounters some not very nice people. This made me really, really tense. It was actually the penultimate book of theirs that I read. The ending I didn't love as much. Just sometimes the resolution, you know, you need the resolution in a crime thriller to feel really satisfactory, and it felt a little bit rushed here, but I enjoyed the majority of this book very much. This next one is What to Do When Someone Dies, and I listened to this one on audio. Some of these I listened to on audio, some of them I read them. I thought the audio of this one was particularly good, and this one was so ridiculous in places, and I loved the journey of it because of that. So this is about a woman called Ellie whose husband has died in a car crash, but the police tell her that a woman was also dead in this car with him, and she has no idea who this person was. So the police and all of her friends think that her husband must have been having an affair, but she's adamant that he wasn't. So she decides to kind of disguise herself and go and infiltrate this other woman's life, go and try and get a job where she used to work and make friends with her friends and find out what the hell was going on. And it is so tense because of that. I don't think I breathed for many sections in this book, and I love that. Again, the ending I enjoyed, but it wasn't my favourite, and that was the only thing about this book that brought it down from being an absolute favourite. The premise I thought was brilliant. Then we get to The Lying Room. This is a proof, so it's got the title on the spine there. So this was the very first book of theirs that I read. So this is what got me into all of this. So as you can tell, I did enjoy it. This is a book about a woman called Neve Connolly, and she goes into the flat of a man, her boss, that she's having an affair with, and she finds him there dead. And you may be thinking, didn't I just tell you a blurb that was similar to that? Yes, but also no. The books are very different, but on the surface, yes, the opening scene is slightly similar to Complicit or Behind the Closed Door. So this is about a woman called Neve who goes to the flat of her boss, who she's having an affair with, and he's dead. And she thinks, what am I going to do? I should call the police and tell them to come and investigate so that we can find out who murdered this man that I love. But if I do that, then everyone will find out that I was having an affair with him, and she's married and she's got children, and she just is so terrified that her whole life will be even more destroyed than it is in that moment, looking at, you know, the body of the person that she loved. So instead what she does is she decides to clean the flat from top to bottom. So essentially she destroys any evidence the police could get, and she does that to save face. And then she calls the police. So as she's leaving, she calls the police, so they come and find the body, but it's a bit useless to them because they have no idea what happened and they can't solve the crime. So she then goes on to try and solve the crime herself. Again, that tension between her trying to solve this crime in secret and her family life is what is really compelling about this book. And that is a device that they use a lot in their work, and I didn't tire of it at all. My favourite book from this middle pile, before we get on to my favourites, is a book I read at the beginning of this month called Land of the Living. This gave me Room by Emma Donoghue vibes, though this was written way before Room was published, which I think was 2010, and this was published in 2002, I think. Yeah, 2002. So this is about a woman called Abby, and we open with her having been kidnapped. She's bound and gagged. She doesn't know where she is. A man comes in every so often to give her food. That's all. She can't remember how she got there, where, how she was kidnapped. She also can't remember a couple of days leading up to being kidnapped. And I didn't know if I was going to enjoy this one because I thought it was going to be mostly her set, you know, being kidnapped. She talks in very minute detail about counting and everything she can smell, and she tries to move around the room a little bit and everything she can touch, and I didn't find that particularly compelling at first, and I just thought, I don't know how you can sustain this over a whole book. But that's not what happens. After the first few chapters, she is able to escape, and I don't consider that a huge spoiler because it is very close to the beginning of the book. She's able to escape, and she runs, gets help, and then is in hospital, and the police are there and they're asking her if she's okay, and she says, I was kidnapped, I was locked up somewhere. And they say, okay, kidnapped by who? She doesn't know. Kidnapped where? She can't remember where because she ran out in the dark and she just ran in a direction for quite a long period of time. She was completely disorientated, so she can't particularly remember where she was either. And the police think that she's a very unreliable person. as opposed to a very traumatized person, and they just don't take her that seriously. But obviously she's terrified because this man is still out there and he could come and find her, and he had told her that he had kidnapped and killed other women. So she sees herself as under threat, not just because she'd been kidnapped before, but because she knows the names of the women that he confessed to her as having killed. So she sees herself as a target, and she's trying to piece together her life, those days she can't remember before she was kidnapped. So investigating her own life is really, really fascinating. And they do this in one other book, using memory loss as a plot point. I thought it worked so well. I was so invested. I really enjoyed it. I think it's just the beginning bit is why this is not a favorite, but it's so close to being that. I loved it. Maybe it is a favorite. Oh, I'm just contradicting myself. Whatever. I loved most of these books. The difference between the individual titles is in some cases minimal. Okay, so we're moving on to my favorites. Beneath the Skin is told from the point of view of 3 different women who are being threatened and stalked by one man, and he does succeed in killing the first woman. And so we know his patterns as we progress through the book, as these women have more information and then perhaps more of a chance at surviving. I found there are individual chapters between the sections about the women that are narrated by the killer that I didn't love. I don't like reading things from the point of view of killers. I want to read from the point of view of, in this case, the women who are trying desperately to survive and fight back and break down systems that are trying to control them. That's where Nicci French sings for me. The Memory Game is one of my favorites by them. This is a woman who goes to a family reunion, and one of her friends went missing when they were children, and during this reunion the body of her friend is found at the bottom of a garden, and this opens up obviously a whole can of worms because they thought that she'd run away from home ages ago, and she's trying to remember what she can about her childhood and the people that they knew growing up, and trying to work out if she can discover who had killed her. This is a brilliant illustration of having lots of different characters. I had to draw myself a family tree so I could remember everybody, but I didn't find that frustrating. I enjoyed putting in the work to contextualize everything and try and help solve the crime myself. Really enjoyed this. Then next on my list is The Unheard, which is their most recent book and the one that I finished reading this morning. It's coming out this month. This is about a woman called Tess. She has split up with her partner, Jason. They broke up about a year or so ago, and they have a young daughter together called Poppy. And Poppy has been acting strangely. She has been swearing a lot and doing these strange drawings, and her mother, Tess, is trying to work out if she's upset by her parents splitting up or whether she's witnessed something really terrible because she keeps drawing a drawing and saying that someone did kill this woman. And Tess is, slightly perturbed by this. Sure, children say strange things, but this just seems to be a little bit too strange. But again, the people around her think that she's paranoid, they think that she's stressed, and she starts trying to investigate and doing questionable things. All of the characters in these books are flawed. They have the best of intentions because they want to solve crimes, but in doing so they'll break into someone's house and hack into their email accounts, and it's all very exciting. So Tess does a lot of these things in the name of trying to find out the truth, but sometimes she obviously investigates the wrong people and that annoys her friends, and then she loses support, which again puts her in more dangerous situations. One other thing that I love about Nicci French titles as a whole is the intertextuality. There are occasionally minor characters who crop up again and you don't need to know who they are at all, but it's just pleasing and a nice little nod to the people who've read all of their books. So in this book, Tess goes to see a psychotherapist. She goes to the warehouse, which is where Frieda Klein works, and I got very excited and slightly teary thinking, oh my goodness, is Frieda going to be in this book? She is not. Paz is in this book. If you have read the Frieda Klein series, that's the receptionist who works at the warehouse, but that's the only crossover character here. But it was just something that warmed my heart slightly. And then the next on my list is the second most recent release. This came out last autumn. This is The House of Correction. And like with Land of the Living, this is a book where the main character is trying to solve a crime that she was supposed to bear witness to, but she can't remember. In fact, she's trying to solve it from prison because she's been convicted of killing someone and she has no memory of this at all. In this book, Nicci French definitely comments on the prison system and how terrible it is, and how the main character, Tabitha, is allowed to represent herself in court, but she's not offered much support at all. She doesn't understand the way the system works, and that puts her at a massive disadvantage. But instead of helping her out, everyone's just thinks that she's wasting their time when all she's trying to do is absolve herself or find out if she did actually kill this person. You know, she does have part of her that thinks, maybe I did do it, but if I did it, I want to know why. So she left this small village when she was a teenager and she recently moved back. And when she moved back, this man, Stuart Reese, died, was murdered, and was discovered in her garden shed. So you can see why the police arrested her, but she just has this period of time where she was extremely stressed and she was very depressed and she can't remember things very well at all. I thought this was a really, really well done book. And my two favourite standalones, I actually can't decide which one I love the most. So I'm just going to hold them up together. Talk about them separately, but know that I love them both equally. So this is Losing You. And the reason that I love this one is because I needed to know what happened. I feel that about so many of their books, but this one the most of all, I needed to know the answer. I couldn't put this book down at all. It's set over the course of one day, which I think really propels the novel forward. It's a woman called Nina who's getting ready to go on holiday to Florida with her family, her new partner and her two children, but her daughter hasn't returned home from a sleepover. She was supposed to come home after her paper round, pack her things, and they were all going to go to the airport together, but she hasn't arrived. Now, Nina is really anxious about this because her daughter was really looking forward to going on holiday, her daughter Charlie, so she knows that something has happened to her. But of course, when she calls the police, they say, she's a teenager, it's been 2 hours, we're not going to investigate. So this is Nina driving around this small seaside town, trying to solve the mystery of what has happened to her daughter over the course of one day. And she is such a wonderful character. I loved her, and it's so frantic. And again, she does things that maybe don't help herself on occasion, but only because she loves her daughter very much. And my other favorite standalone is The Red Room. And I think that this one is my favorite because it is very reminiscent of the Frieda Klein series. They wrote this book actually 10 years before they published the first Frieda Klein book. And I would love to talk to them about whether or not they had wanted to give this character another go, but thought they would just reinvent her in a different form and therefore brought Frieda to life. There are lots of similarities between the main character in this and Frieda Klein. So this isn't about a psychotherapist, but it is about a psychologist. She's called Kit Quinn. And at the beginning of this, she's called to a police station to examine someone who's been brought in because he'd been hanging around outside of school. Essentially, the police don't like him. They think he's creepy and they are worried that he's going to do something. So they want her to come in and provide a kind of assessment. And when she gets there, she says, this is a very troubled man, but you are making it worse because you're trying to accuse him of something that he hasn't done. You're following him around a lot, and that is influencing his behavior. You need to back off because you're handling this badly. But it escalates, and in the room, she's then attacked by this man, and she ends up having a facial disfigurement. And then we go forward in time, and we see her returning to work, and how her friends and her family react to her change in appearance. And again, I think this is a really good representation of disfigurement, which they have here. So she's trying to cope with returning to work, but also with society's ableism, which she finds more frustrating than the returning to work bit. And the police call her because they are suspicious again of this man, and they say, wouldn't you like the chance to get your revenge? And again, she's frustrated because she's like, that's not how I see it. So I thought that the crime in this book was so fascinating. There is someone in here who reminds me of Alan Decker, if you've read the Frieda Klein books. And also there is a crime that is talked about in here that is then referenced in a Frieda Klein book, which I really liked. I'm not sure if it's a crime that actually happened. Maybe it is. And I should say also in the book Until It's Over, this one here, which is the one about the courier who goes around London, Hal Bradshaw is in this book. Hal Bradshaw is an awful, awful character in the Frieda Klein books. And by awful character, I mean he is detestable. He is very well written, and he is detestable in Until It's Over as well. And he appears, and it's his job to give a profile of who he thinks this killer will be. He comes in and he says, I think it's someone with a disfigurement. He's that kind of person. So again, that's one of the character crossovers, and the plots of these books serve to show how redundant people like Hal Bradshaw, who have these very prejudiced ideas, are. So yeah, adored this one. If you're thinking about picking up the Frieda Klein series, but obviously it's a big investment, 8 books, maybe read this book first and see if you enjoy it, because if you do, I think you will really love the Frieda Klein books. But if you're just looking for a fast-paced standalone, then this is something that I would recommend you go to. As for where to start with their books in general, obviously I would just recommend the ones more towards the favourite end of the standalone books that I have spoken about. Pick up ones that you think most appeal to the kind of themes that you're interested in reading about. So those are all the standalones. Let's move on to their series. All right, this is the Frieda Klein series. We'll not talk about the fact that I bought this as a box set and all the books are different sizes, and that irks me quite a lot, but there we go. So we have 8 books going from Monday down to Sunday, with the final book being Day of the Dead. I think that they do have slightly different titles in the States, but they still follow the days of the week. And the first one is called Blue Monday. So this is about a psychotherapist called Frieda Klein. She works at a place called The Warehouse with her friend Ruben, and she lives in a small mews house just off Tottenham Court Road, and she enjoys her private space. Her adopted family, and I use that as not as in the literal term adopted, but her blood family live far away from her and she doesn't have a great relationship with them, which you discover more about as the series goes on. But her adoptive family around her and her friends do invade her personal space quite a lot, which both frustrates her but also fills her with love. So the cast of characters around her are wonderful, and you get to learn more and more about them as the series progresses. Her friend Ruben, she works with, she comes to know a police officer called Malcolm Carlson, and she makes friends with a builder called Joseph, who falls through her ceiling one day because he's working in the building, well, the floor above her in the building that she works in, and they end up becoming friends. She has a niece, Chloe, and a sister-in-law who she is very close to, and several other people, a best friend called Sasha. There are so many people that you will just fall in love with as you read these books, and each of them plays a role in various different titles, sometimes being involved in the crimes that Frieda is trying to solve, but sometimes just being there for moral support. The first book is her becoming quite suspicious of one of the clients that she has, a man called Alan Decker, who says that he really wants to have a child, can't have one. He's having visions of having a young boy, and he describes him, and then Frieda sees the papers and this young boy that he's described has gone missing. So she starts to do some investigation work herself because she feels bad about reporting Alan to the police because she doesn't know if he's actually done anything. And then that just opens a whole can of worms. So every single book has its own mystery to solve, but then there is an overarching plot as well. Individually, my favourites are Waiting for Wednesday, Thursday's Child, and Saturday Requiem. I really love the mystery elements of those books. Thursday's Child is where you find out the most about Frieda's childhood and family, which is really fascinating. Big warnings for sexual assault in that particular book. I found it really difficult to read, especially because by that point we've come to know the characters really well. But I mean, let me tell you, I have read all of these books listened to them. They're beautifully narrated by a woman called Beth Chalmers. I have listened to them at least 7 times, the whole series, in the last 2 years. They are now my comfort listens to. The thing that I have loved the most has obviously been the reading experience of reading this series, but something that I have loved so much as well is sharing that love of the books with you here and talking about them. And I was going through messages and comments. At least 500 of you have gone out and bought the Frieda Klein series or got it from the library, have been listening to it. And talking to you about that has made me feel like we're part of this huge book club, which I have absolutely adored, and not just on here, but real life family and friends of mine. My friend Max, lovely Max Porter, and his wife have been reading the series, and Max and I were having a very friendly argument about who we would dream cast into a TV series of this series, and I don't understand why that TV show hasn't happened yet, trying to, manifest. So we were arguing on Twitter about who we would cast, and I will share my cast with you in a second because I find it really fun to think about these things. And he was saying this is all entirely wrong, but then Nicci French, Sean and Nikki, replied, seeing the dream cast and saying this is a great cast. So now I think, if we could just make that happen, that would just be great. So this is my dream cast for the show. And if you've read the books, I would love to know if you agree with these choices or who you would cast instead. And if you haven't read the series, then these are maybe people to keep in mind when you do read them. So I would cast Frieda as Gillian Anderson. Gillian Anderson as Frieda. I just would. I cannot see anybody else playing that character. And Carlson has to be played by Patterson Joseph. He just has to be. That's who is in my head when I read these books. Then we have Olivia, who is Frieda's sister-in-law, who I would have as Tania Miller. And then her daughter Chloe, I would have as Lydia West. I love both of those actors in Years and Years, and I've seen them in other stuff, but together they acted as mother and daughter in Years and Years, and I love that. So let's have that again, please. Reuben has to be Dominic West. Has to be Dominic West. I mean, Dominic West should play most characters in life, but just has to be Dominic West. And Joseph has to be Kim Bodnia, who was in Killing Eve and has been in loads of different stuff and is just a gem. I adore him. Then Jack, I have as Steve Young. Dean Reeve, I have as David Thewlis. I think he would be brilliant as Dean Reeve. Yvette, I have as Nikki and Micah Bird. And then Sandy, I have as Richard Armitage, which may be a controversial choice, but I can see it. My favourite casting, perhaps, from all of this would be Hal Bradshaw as Kenneth Branagh, primarily because Hal Bradshaw is essentially Muggle Lockhart. That is who he is. He thinks he is so great and that everybody loves him, except he's really not very good at his job. Yeah, has to be Kenneth Branagh. And then Sasha, I would have as Sian Clifford, who was in Fleabag. I love her too. So that would be my dream cast. Obviously, you need a few other people, but that would be my core cast there. And I would love to know if you agree or disagree with those choices. I have a feeling I've probably been talking for quite a long time, but essentially, in a nutshell, I love Nicci French. I adore the Frieda Klein series. If you haven't tried it yet, please do. The audiobook narrated, or audiobooks narrated by Beth Chalmers, are fantastic. The standalones also have some great audiobook narrators. They're mostly, if not all, narrated by different people, which is really interesting. And I listened to about maybe between a third and half on audio and really enjoyed that reading experience. As I mentioned, obviously most of the enjoyable reading experiences because the books are so brilliant, but like with any reading experience, I think you have to consider the time and place of reading them. And apart from the Frieda Klein series, which I first read in 2019, and The Lying Room, which I read before that, all of these books have kept me company during shielding times. I've been shielding now for over 18 months, and they have really kept me company, as has the Frieda Klein series, because I've listened to them, as I said, 7 times, maybe more. It's a lot. They've kept me company while cooking, while going out for walks, and I have loved that this has been my reading experience over the last 18 months in COVID times, obviously, along with all the other books that I've been reading. Storygraph give you obviously graphs for different things that you have been reading, but there is a a graph that shows you authors that you've picked up more than once, and obviously the graph is just quite low, but then you get Nicci French and it careens off the chart, because I have read more books by them than anyone definitely in my adult life. As a child, obviously, I read lots of books by I don't know, Enid Blyton and R.L. Stein and Lucy Daniels and stuff like that. But as an adult, I haven't read a huge catalogue of someone's books like this before, and it has been an absolute joy. So I'm going to wrap this up. I would love to know if you have picked up their books before, what you have thought of them, or if you're going to dive into them now that I have waxed lyrical and given you some kind of ranking system for my personal favourites. I hope that you're all having a good week, and I will speak to you very soon. Sending lots of love. Bye. Oh, and now I have to try and hold these books for a thumbnail, so pray for me.